أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Afterwards, good afternoon, and I hope you are doing great. In today's in today's live class, I would like to start by answering a question asked by many students about reading, and I have decided to discuss this question today, or to answer this question today, because recently I've been talking about the habit of reading and how important reading is, followed by the article I translated from English to Hausa or into Hausa, written by Professor Ibrahim Belakano. Well, actually, as we know, reading doesn't want to be read. This is a fact. According to the same author, that is Professor IBK, reading doesn't want to be read. So that is why sometimes you can start, but you fail to continue. However, some other readers answer by saying, if you fail to continue reading a book, then the book isn't interesting, or something like that nature. I read a writer who was just pretending, who was just saying that if you are reading a book and you fail to continue, so maybe the author isn't a good author. He doesn't know how to immerse you in reading. Well, by experience, I can say this is very true, because even if you are not very well motivated to read, but there is sometimes what happens. That is, number one, we feel asleep. You want to read, but you feel as if you're going to sleep. You feel somnolent. This happens a lot, and sometimes it is because you don't have enough vocabulary to understand the book. This is another hindrance. Sometimes you are reading something and your attention is not there. Okay, let me say something with regard to the book that you are reading. I usually advise people generally to read books that they find interesting. Read books that you find interesting. For example, if reading the Holy Quran is what motivates you, it what keeps you reading, what keeps you continue reading. So stick to it. You understand? But if, for example, you want to read the Holy Quran while your attention is with you, then read it. But if, for example, you would like to read the Holy Quran and your attention is not there, and maybe you would like to read it while you feel the meaning in you, you internalize the meaning of the verses that you are reading. At the very moment you are reading, maybe you're thinking about an amount of money, so don't continue reading. Because by experience, reading should be done at a particular time that can be best described as psychological moment. Of course, psychological moment here refers to a time that you do something, and while it is the suitable time for you to do it. Don't read if you are not in a good mood, for example, because sometimes reading in a situation whereby you are not comfortable enough to read then can cause a lot of distraction. For example, don't read while you are very angry. If you're angry at somebody or about something and you start reading, maybe the reading will never be interesting. It will be monotonous because you have been thinking about what you're doing. So I advise you should read when you feel that, of course, it interests you, it excites your imagination to do it. So don't read when you don't feel comfortable. Read when you feel that, of course, you also want to read. That's number one. Number two, about selecting books. Now we have a lot of books. You can have a lot of books at your own disposal. I don't advise people to read books that are very difficult for them to understand. No. If you go to a bookshop to buy a book, start reading the first chapters. If you're able to understand what you are reading, then you can buy the book. But if you want to buy a book and you find it a little bit difficult to understand, don't buy it. Skip it. Leave it. I sometimes advise people to read books that they can understand. Read books that you find interesting. Read books that can keep you reading. Read books that do not usually challenge you. Because if you're trying to inculcate the habit of reading culture in you, then it should be a gradual process. It shouldn't be a very difficult process, and it shouldn't be a pacey, quick, swift process. It should be a gradual one. So start gradually, start gradually, start gradually. As a child, for example, he begins by listening to people. Later, he starts practicing, and later he becomes excellent at what he is doing. This is how it is supposed to be. So that's number one. Don't read books that you are not interested in reading. For example, at least try to put in your mind that, yeah, this book can maybe take my attention or can just excite me. Now I am in a bad mood, but maybe I like to read books written about maybe travel. So maybe traveling will excite your imagination. So read it. Or for example, you suffer from the bitters of love or rigors of love, okay? And you would like to find something that can excite your mind, something that can make you less bored, understand? So maybe you can read books about hope and so on. So that's what I advise. Read books that interests you. For example, sometimes you need to read adventures like Robinson Crusoe. Let me tell you an anecdote. I recommended that book to one student, and later when the student started reading the book, I think the student finished reading the book in just one day. Why? Because the book is very interesting, and it held the student spellbound, if you like. It was so interesting. It blew the mind of the student. The student couldn't put it down until it was finished. And this is how it is supposed to be done. Read books that can create suspense in you, something that can make you continue reading and reading and reading and reading non-stop. This is number one. Number two, that is the point that I would like to discuss. Sometimes we read books and we come across a lot of words that we don't know. Okay, nobody says you must know everything that you are reading, but read for the general meaning of something. Let me cite you an example. If you're reading a book that has like 100 pages, don't say if you read that particular book, you have to understand all the 100 pages. This is impossible. But what I advise is that read the book and try to understand the drift, the gist, the general meaning of what you are reading. This is very good. So if you read a chapter, for example, don't say you have to understand everything that you have read, but just try to understand the general meaning, the general idea of the chapter, because this is the only way that you can use to continue reading. You can use a pencil to underline the words and the expressions that you would like to find out their meanings later. So this is very important when it comes to reading culture in this way. Now, apart from this too, I advise that if you are reading any book, try to read it first of all for the purpose of, for example, the purpose of getting the general information. That's very good. And secondly, if there is a word that it must be understood before that particular chapter is clearly understood, so you can just write the word down and find its meaning. You can use your own dictionary to find the meaning. You can ask someone who can tell you the meaning as quickly as he can or she can, and so on. This is how it is. So these are my pieces of advice with regard to reading. And then thirdly, getting a book that you can read is never easy. I mean, it's never difficult, because now we have our phones, and if you're interested in reading any book, you can just ask me about it. And if I have it, I will share it with you, God willing. There is no problem in terms of this. What I would like people to understand is that reading is an oasis that comes like an absolute surprise, according to Professor. So I believe in this saying too. Therefore, finding a book that you can read is never a problem. If you feel sleepy, sleep. Of course, if you feel sleepy while you are reading, sleep. Okay, wake up after the sleep. And if you wake up, then try as much as you can to create, to, if you like, to inculcate that interest in you once again. For example, if you read at night and you find out that you usually fall asleep, so don't continue reading at night. Try to find another time. Maybe they say, let me try it maybe in the morning before I go to market. Let me just read after Subhi prayer, for example. Let me read after 6 a.m. So try it in this way. Do it at your own convenience. Don't read if you are not at your own convenience. Because anything that you would like to do it, you should have a psychological moment that you can read. This is how it is supposed to be done. So for those that have been asking me about this problem, I would like to read. But the issue is that once I start reading, then I fail. This is the advice that you can consider. Try to do it. Find a book that is interesting. Find an author that knows how to tell a story. For example, Robinson Crusoe is a very good book because it has so many mechanisms of telling a story. The writer was able to write it in a way that can hold the suspense of the readers, and that's what makes it extraordinary. For example, read Pride and Prejudice because the writer is also a philosopher, was also a philosopher. She knows or she knew how to write it better. Look at the events, the chronological aspect of the story from beginning to end, how she was able to mix or to fix some certain scenes in the book. This is how it is supposed to be done. Find authors that know how to write. Find authors that are, for example, that are very good at writing and read them because these authors can make you keep reading their work. And then thirdly, if you are talking about the time for reading, I am not saying you must spend like 1 hour reading. No. For someone who wants to begin, just begin by, say, read like for 15 minutes. If you want to create this culture in you, so start gradually. Read for 15 minutes and then stop. Put a mark after you have stopped, and then you can continue the other day. How we understand? And then, as we know, the best act is the act that a person continues doing it, even no matter how small it is. Yes, of course. You understand? That is what I always encourage people to do. It is said, mafi alkhairin ayyuka su ne ayyukan da aka dawoma ana yi ko da ayyuka sun karanta. Ko mafi alkhairin aiki shine aikin da aka dawoma ana yi ko da aikin yayi karanci ma'ana ba a yin sa haka da yawa ko da kaɗan ake yin sa a san da ake yin sa. So let's begin with this philosophy. You understand? Let's begin with it. Okay? Start reading by, for example, allotting 15 minutes to it. If you want to inculcate this culture in you, then if you are able to read for 15 minutes, then it is your interest that can add the minutes. So add 15 minutes, like you have half an hour. Okay, but don't start with 2 hours or 1 hour because you will get bored. It will be boring for you to read for an hour if you're not so interested. Okay? So what you should do, start with 15 minutes. If you succeed in that, add 15 minutes. Now you have like 30 minutes. And then continue. But you should spend like 1 hour, for example, if the culture develops. I don't advise you to read for 15 hours or for 20 hours or for 5 hours. What I say is that if you can read with interest for like 1 hour, okay, so stick to that 1 hour until you find a better time, until you find extra hours that you can read. And don't forget, try to do reading like every day, for example. For example, Professor Ibike says read like 2 pages every day. And you can read everything that you can lay your hands on. And I sometimes say you can read like, for example, you can read like 4 pages every day. But if you have a book of 100 pages, for example, can be read within a week. So try to divide. Okay, now I have 100. How can I divide it into like the total days that we have in a week? That is 7. Divide that 100 to 7. And God willing, you can see how it will work. Thank you very much, and I hope these tips I have given have been very important and it will help you to build up your culture of reading. Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us achieve this aim that we have. And about those that haven't received their own, gift of that particular lesson with regard to Pride and Prejudice, please try to follow that particular link that I stated under my profile. Try to follow it, and God willing, you will have the book delivered to you. I'm very sorry because we have been working on that, and many people have received theirs, but the number of the people that are interested in having the book is too many. That's why the number is high. That is why we are just sending it gradually, and we have been working tirelessly in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, in the middle of the night. So it's never easy. So please, in case we might forget, try to follow the instructions that I've been, writing about, and God willing, the book will be delivered to you as good. As if you like, as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.